네. 알겠습니다. 자, 그러면 영상을 같이 보겠습니다.
Hi everyone, I am Elizabeth Daniels, Professor and Director at the Center for Appearance Research at the University of the West of England, Bristol. I am going to be describing the center a little bit before moving into our focus today on body image education programs. So we are a world-leading research group focused specifically on appearance-related concerns. This is a photo of much of the team from a conference we held in 2024. Our mission is to conduct and use research to help people in society accept and appreciate all bodies. Our vision is to expand our impact beyond academia, creating a world where diversity in appearance is fully valued. Our work is grounded in excellence, leadership, social impact, community, equity, and belonging. So what is it that we do specifically? First, we look at the nature and prevalence of appearance-related concerns. So we ask the questions, who's affected, how, and why. And then secondly, we develop and evaluate interventions to support people with appearance-related concerns. So we ask the question, how can psychology help? We are funded externally through grants across a wide range of funders. Their support is necessary for us to conduct our work. And we disseminate our findings through traditional academic outlets like journal articles, conference presentations, books, and so forth. But we are very focused on disseminating beyond traditional academic channels. So for instance, we have a podcast called Appearance Matters, and it's freely available on all major podcast platforms. We have produced over 100 episodes at this point across 10 years. And our guests include researchers and experts on various topics related to appearance, but we aim to talk about these issues in ways that are accessible to a broad audience of parents, teachers, healthcare professionals, anyone interested in this topic. We also do media interviews regularly. Just a few examples from 2026 include interview regarding new NHS advice, the National Health Service here in the UK, advice on children's eating disorders. One of our team commented on an article about that. A different article around embracing aging that the BBC put out, and finally a new article regarding AI and body image. We're also very active on social media. This is where you can find us. And in addition to sort of media dissemination channels, we also aim to engage in public policy. So this was an example from June of 2025, where I provided some expert testimony to the UK Parliament. And then finally, we run a conference every 2 years called Appearance Matters. And it is aimed primarily at academics, but we have healthcare professionals, individuals who work in charities that support appearance research, and so forth, also attend this conference. And you're more than welcome to attend as well if possible. So that's a little bit about the Center for Appearance Research. And now I'm going to shift to the focus of today, which is about school-based, strength-based body image education. And specifically, I was asked to think about how to design strength-based programs so young people can build confidence and critical media literacy. So this is obviously an ambitious ask, and I just want to be clear that I'm going to talk about some key considerations that you might think about in developing these kinds of programs, rather than providing sort of a recipe for success. So the great news is that we have a strong research foundation for body image programs that do focus on positive aspects of body image. And these are a few academic books on the left and the right, and a workbook for individuals in the middle. And I also want to point you to a journal article, which is posted on the University Repository website here at the University of the West of England. So you can access this without having to worry about a paywall. It's readily available for free. And the study was conducted by some colleagues here at the Center for Appearance Research, and it's a systematic review of interventions aimed at young people, children and adolescents, to promote positive body image. And a key takeaway from this paper is that studies using, or programs, I should say, using cognitive dissonance, peer support, and psychoeducation, there is good evidence that those particular kinds of body image programs can improve body appreciation and body esteem in adolescent girls. Unfortunately, there's far less work on these issues with boys, and therefore there's very little empirical evidence that we can draw on for programs aimed at boys specifically. Okay, so in terms of some broad patterns, we know that the existing body image education programs out there typically focus on negative body image rather than positive body image. So in terms of negative body image, we're thinking about programs that help alleviate body dissatisfaction rather than cultivating a strengths-based concept such as positive body image. And these would be characteristics like body appreciation, for example. So we have this imbalance in the research literature, but there are increasingly more studies and more programs focused on positive body image today. And this is really important because we know that positive body image is linked to better physical and mental health in young people. So this includes things like less smoking, less alcohol consumption, more positive affect, and higher body esteem. So we do want to make sure that we are teaching young people how to cultivate positive body image. The other thing to note in terms of these existing body image education programs is that they have typically been developed in North America, the UK, and Australia. And most of them are focused on girls rather than boys or children of other genders. Okay, so in terms of key considerations when developing a program, you want to think about the delivery agent. So is it going to be a researcher or a clinician delivering curriculum, or a teacher, or a near peer like university students? And there are pros and cons to each of these choices, and sometimes it comes down to logistics in terms of who would be available to deliver the curriculum. Another key consideration is timing. So the vast majority of the existing programs tend to focus on children at least 12 years of age, and so early adolescence, so 12 to 14. And then programs also will target late adolescents, 15 to 18-year-olds. There are far, far fewer programs aimed at younger children. Two have been developed within the Center for Appearance Research for children ages 9 to 11. And these have included playing a novel board game and a yoga intervention. And then there's
잠깐만요.
very little
문제 좀
in the
해결하겠습니다.
very young age group of children ages 4 to 6. Again, the Center for Appearance Research, some colleagues here have been active in developing.
걱정했던 바가 현실이 됐네요. 이 노트북 때문에 화면이 멈췄습니다. 다시 이게 앞으로 좀 더 가가지고 다시 시작을 하겠습니다. 이게 왜냐면요. 어떡하지? 소은님, 혹시 여기서 새로 들어오시는 분들을 입장 허가를 시켜주시는 게 가능할까요? 그걸 확인하다가 이제 화면 왔다 갔다 하다가 이게 멈춘 것 같아요, 영상이.
네, 가능합니다. 근데
네,
요청하신 분이 없어가지고.
그쵸. 그래서 그걸 확인하다가 영상을 제가 중간부터 다시 틀어보겠습니다. 잠깐만요. 아이고야.
Okay, so in terms of some broad patterns, we know that the existing body image education programs out there typically focus on negative body image rather than positive body image. So in terms of negative body image, we're thinking about programs that help alleviate body dissatisfaction rather than cultivating a strengths-based concept such as positive body image. And these would be characteristics like body appreciation, for example. So we have this imbalance in the research literature, but there are increasingly more studies and more programs focused on positive body image today. And this is really important because we know that positive body image is linked to better physical and mental health in young people. So this includes things like less smoking, less alcohol consumption, more positive affect, and higher body esteem. So we do want to make sure that we are teaching young people how to cultivate positive body image. The other thing to note in terms of these existing body image education programs is that they have typically been developed in North America, the UK, and Australia. And most of them are focused on girls rather than boys or children of other genders. Okay, so in terms of key considerations when developing a program, you want to think about the delivery agent. So is it going to be a researcher or a clinician delivering curriculum, or a teacher, or a near peer like university students? And there are pros and cons to each of these choices, and sometimes it comes down to logistics in terms of who would be available to deliver the curriculum. Another key consideration is timing. So the vast majority of the existing programs tend to focus on children at least 12 years of age, and so early adolescence, so 12 to 14. And then programs also will target late adolescents, 15 to 18-year-olds. There are far, far fewer programs aimed at younger children. Two have been developed within the Center for Appearance Research for children ages 9 to 11. And these have included playing a novel board game and a yoga intervention. And then there's very little in the very young age group of children ages 4 to 6. Again, the Center for Appearance Research, some colleagues here have been active in developing curriculum for children in that age bracket. And I put an example there for you. The third consideration is thinking about group composition. So will curriculum be delivered to single gender groups or all gender? And often this will come down to kind of cultural norms in a particular area of the world or region, as well as the school's approach. Obviously, if it's a single gender school, the curriculum is being delivered in that context. And so this would be oftentimes more of a pragmatic issue rather than one that's sort of driven by research considerations. Another set of considerations here include thinking about dosage. So this would be the number and frequency of sessions. When we look at the existing body of literature assessing body image education programs, the number of programs ranges quite widely from just one session at one time to sessions that are regularly happening across 3 to 4 months. In that case, when they're kind of longer term programs, they tend to run weekly. So we see that pretty often. In terms of setting, a lot of these programs are delivered in schools, and that's tied again to some practical considerations. Children are in school for the majority of their day. A lot of places in the world organize schooling such that children are in age-graded classrooms, so they would be at similar levels of development. And then finally, oftentimes this type of curriculum can be incorporated into other school curriculum. And so practically speaking, delivering body image education in schools makes a lot of sense in a lot of contexts. In terms of evaluation methods, typically what we see in the literature is children are assessed before a program begins. And this might be a few days to a week before, and then immediately following a program. So that's the typical format. Sometimes we see that children are then assessed at follow-up, and that could be 2 weeks later, 6 weeks later, or 3 months later. That's not as common, but it is highly useful for researchers to see if there are enduring effects of a program. And then often evaluation methods rely on surveys containing validated scales that measure body image. So it's very common, but arguably it may not be the most child-friendly way to assess a program. And so that's a challenging issue, of course, but it is one to consider whether there are some more child-friendly ways to assess the efficacy of a program. And then finally, I'll talk a little bit about acceptability and feasibility. So if you're planning to adapt a program that already exists, that's been developed in another region of the world, you'll want to think about, is this curriculum relevant to the children I'll be working with? Are changes needed? And if so, what needs to be changed? And sometimes this is relatively minor, changing words for a teacher in one area versus a lecturer potentially in another area and so forth. But sometimes it can be quite involved. It's more than just a wording change. And then secondly, thinking about whether the program covers the range of body image concerns that are relevant to your audience. So as I mentioned, many of the programs that exist right now have been developed in high income, English speaking countries with a European descent majority population. And as a result, the focus of these programs is often on the thin ideal. And that may or may not be relevant in other contexts. In any case, it's quite narrow in its focus. And so looking at whether there are other body image concerns that should be included in the curriculum. Another issue to think about is the acceptability to the children involved. So do the children or adolescents find the curriculum acceptable? Do they like it? Will they engage with that content? So obviously, but it's worth saying, curriculum won't be effective if the audience does not like it. And then sort of an analog, if you will, is thinking about the feasibility of implementing the curriculum in schools. Is that easy to do? Is the program readily delivered within a school context? Does it work with the school schedule in terms of its length and frequency of meeting times, for example? Do the teachers find the program to be positive? Will they support it? These are the kinds of things that you want to make sure are in place before you would move forward trying to deliver curriculum. So those are a set of key considerations that I recommend really spending time thinking about as you develop your own curriculum. And I will close with where you can reach us at the Center for Appearance Research. We are happy to be a resource, and we wish you the best developing curriculum.
바로 다음 영상으로 이어지겠습니다.
Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Kirsty Garbutt, and I'm a Senior Research Fellow at the Centre for Appearance Research. I'm delighted to be here today to talk to you about EDAW2026, which is a school-based body image program for 11 to 14-year-olds. So a little bit of background before we dive into what the program is. So EDAW2026 has been produced and developed by the Dove Self-Esteem Project, which is the social purpose initiative of Unilever's leading personal care brand, Dove. The Dove Self-Esteem Project was founded in 2004 and with the aim of ensuring that the next generation grow up to be happy and content, free from misconstrued beauty stereotypes and the burden of self-doubt. They deliver programs through body confidence education to children through lessons in schools, workshops for youth groups, and a variety of media modalities. A key one of their programs being EDAW2026. So, in terms of CAR's involvement in the Dove Self-Esteem Project, it really came about off the back of a global report that Dove commissioned in 2012, where they surveyed women and young girls from all over the world to see how body confident they were. And a key finding that they had from that was that 6 in 10 girls didn't feel body confident. And this is exactly what they have set out to change. So shortly after this report was conducted, conversations began between the Dove Self-Esteem Project and the Centre for Appearance Research. And out of those conversations, which were had with my colleague, Professor Philippa Deirdricks, an academic partnership was formed between the Dove Self-Esteem Project and CAR, whereby CAR would help develop resources to ensure that they are grounded in the best, most up-to-date evidence base in terms of body image interventions and what we know works from the academic literature. And Dove Self-Esteem Project, with their reach in dissemination tools, would ensure whatever we developed is proven to be effective, reaches those in need. So it's a bit of a dream partnership, really, where we have these kind of shared goals to improve body confidence among young people. Where do I fit in all of this? Well, I joined CAR in 2013, specifically to work on year 1 of this partnership. And 12 years on, I am still a member of CAR and still working on this very successful partnership between the Dove Self-Esteem Project and the Centre for Appearance Research. And I continue to work on the very first program that we worked on, which was EDAW2026. So, today what I wanted to cover was, first of all, what is EDAW2026? And then moving on to looking at whether or not it's effective, what is the research behind EDAW2026? And then thinking about acceptability, so do teachers and students like it? From there, we're going to think about some of the adaptations for new cultural contexts. So all the initial work that we did with EDAW2026 was in the UK, but in more recent years, we've gone about adapting it and testing it in new cultural contexts. So I'd love to talk to you a little bit about that today. And then ending on kind of 7 key things that we've learned along the way. So through this process, through this kind of 12, 13-year process that we've had, what have we learned, and what would I encourage anyone working in this space to kind of take forward with them? So EDAW2026. So EDAW2026 is a series of workshops for schools. We have a single session version and we have a 5-session version. We have a 5-session version interventions between kind of 3 and 5 sessions long typically produce the most sustained positive effects. So ideally, that's what we would encourage schools to be teaching across the curriculum. However, we know that the school curriculums can often be very, very busy, and scheduling can be very tight, and timetabling many different topics sometimes makes it unfeasible to deliver a 5-session workshop purely on body image. And that's why we developed a single session version as well, with the idea that if schools couldn't deliver the 5-session, if that was completely unfeasible for a school, at least we could provide something that we could test and hopefully be effective. So something is better than nothing. So there's those 2 versions that we created. The workshop are classroom-based, and they're very interactive in nature. So they are not your typical lesson where a teacher stands up at the front of the classroom and kind of tells children kind of what to learn. It's much more interactive than that, and a teacher is much more a facilitator than a teacher. So really tries to draw out responses and get children talking about the issues as opposed to kind of teaching them about the issues. So it's very student-led. And the workshops as a whole are based on principles of cognitive dissonance and media literacy, and they are designed for teacher-led delivery. So pre-2012, a lot of the school-based resources that were being developed were designed for expert-led delivery. However, this makes them not very scalable, often quite costly to disseminate, and so we really wanted to create a tool that a teacher from any discipline and with any background can pick up and use. So all the resources that you will find in EDAW2026 are suitable for a teacher that has a very kind of low-level understanding of body image issues. It provides all the tools that you might need to learn about it and deliver it effectively. Very briefly, the topics covered in EDAW2026. So if you think about the 5-session version, the first workshop is all about appearance ideals. So discussing how society tells us we should look and why that's problematic and some of the costs of trying to pursue that appearance ideal. We then go into a lesson about media messages, and that's where media literacy really comes to the fore. Then the third workshop is all about comparisons and why it's unfair and unhelpful to compare to our peers or those people that we might see on social media. Lesson 4 is all about body talk and how problematic body talk can be. And then finally, the 5th lesson is all about advocacy and activism, and really encouraging young people to become body confidence champions within their kind of friendship group or within their school or on the broader community level. So really empowering them to take the lead in this space. The single session version is a condensed version of these 5 topics. EDAW2026 employs a variety of teaching strategies. So it comes with a set of activity sheets for every student, and these are particularly good for perhaps those quieter students that don't feel confident in talking in large groups or in small groups even. It gives them the opportunity to write down their thoughts and feelings. Every workshop also comes with at least one video, which is always a particular highlight for the children that take part. And then a lot of the lesson is group-based discussion, either as a whole class or breaking out into small groups and discussing things. So really getting young people to speak out against appearance ideals, for example. So very interactive in nature. So is it effective? In short, yes it is. In 2015-2016, we ran 2 large randomized controlled trials in the UK, testing the single session version and the 5-session version. And kind of as we would expect, we found the single session version created immediate improvements on body esteem and dietary restraint for girls. And for boys, we found an immediate reduction in eating disorder symptoms among girls and boys. This is pretty typical of what we see in the literature. These single session interventions have an immediate improvement in some of our outcomes, but we fail to see change more long term. So for in this trial, we followed up kind of 4 to 8 weeks later. We asked these questions again, and we were finding that effects were lost over time. However, we did see with the 5-session version, we found improvements in body esteem up to 6 months later, which is a really promising finding to find that a 5-session version can have those sustained effects effects over time, and is kind of a really good comparator for other studies in the area in terms of it being quite an effective intervention for body image. Lastly, a really interesting finding from one of our trials is the importance of teacher delivery. So we found that, contrary to our hypotheses, we found that results were typically stronger when delivered by the class teachers rather than body image experts. So when we tested the single session version of Dove Confidently, we had 2 intervention arms where we compared usual class teachers delivering the intervention versus body image experts, so myself and my colleagues. And we were really trying to test whether this is an intervention that can be picked up and delivered by a class teacher who maybe doesn't have all the background knowledge of body image. And we were really pleasantly surprised to see that they were actually able to have stronger effects than body image experts. And we don't know why that is, but anecdotally, I think it was some of those teacher skills about classroom management involving all the students, and really those kind of pedagogical teacher skills are really coming to the fore that allowed the lesson to flow and learning to happen in the classroom. So really promising when we're thinking about broad scale dissemination of these programs, that it is possible, and actually we should really encourage teachers to be picking up these types of interventions to deliver in the classroom. Moving on to acceptability, so do schools, teachers and students like the programme? Well, overwhelmingly, yes, they do, and these statistics are from our UK trial. So we found that 91% of teachers felt confident delivering the programme, and 84% of students said they paid attention, and a similar percentage felt it was an important topic to learn about. We found that typically girls report higher acceptability than boys. And again, we can only hypothesize why this might be. It could be that these issues are just more kind of pertinent to girls than they are boys. That's one possibility. It could also be that we just know more about girls' body image than we do boys. So we unconsciously might have biased the resources to provide more examples or knowledge that we have about girls. So it's less about it being more of an issue for girls, but more of the tools are more directed towards girls because that's what we know more about. We have worked hard since the trial to try and make sure that we are jointly addressing both boys and girls' concerns with the tools, and hopefully have got that balance a little bit better now. And then interestingly, we found that acceptability was higher when delivered by specialist teachers. So what I mean by that is that in the UK at least, in some secondary schools, you will have a dedicated teacher who is responsible for kind of health and well-being education or social emotional learning. In some of the schools that we tested Dove Confidently, those teachers were delivering this lesson. And in some other schools, it could be a teacher from any discipline delivering the lesson. So they could be from languages or maths or biology or PE, the whole variety of teachers maybe delivering the programme. And we really ran with whatever it was that the school would typically do for a lesson like this. And whilst we find that jointly both types of students are as effective as one another in delivering the lesson, we did see higher acceptability when the teacher was a specialist in this type of conversation. And that just might be because students are more familiar with talking about these kinds of issues with this specific teacher, so the conversation could flow better. So that's Confidently in the UK. I now want to give 2 kind of case studies where we've adapted the Confidently content for new cultural contexts. And I want to start with our work that we've conducted in India. So after finding that Dove Confidently was effective in the UK, and with the knowledge that body image is a global concern to young people, we really wanted to see if we could take that programme and adapt it for use in another context. So myself and my colleagues are very fortunate to go out to Delhi and start some collaborative, really strong collaborative partnerships with some psychologists and academics in Delhi. So we work with a professor at Lady Trina College for Women, and we collaborated with Karma Care, who is a counselling centre in the centre of Delhi. And with these collaborators, we spent several days going through the programme together, thinking about what would work in India, what wouldn't work, what we could adapt, what had to go, and had a really intensive few days together where we adapted the content and still targeting the same risk factors, so still looking at media messages, still looking at comparisons. We know all that is cross-cultural, but changing some of the kind of the reference points or changing some of the language to be more suitable for an Indian audience. So here on the left, I've just included some slides of the presentation slides that you could find in Dove Confident in India. And perhaps the most obvious change that we made is removing all white children from the resources and adding images of Indian children, and then changing some of those reference points. So, for example, talking about Bollywood ideals as opposed to Hollywood ideals. Once we created a program that we were happy with, we again ran a randomized controlled trial in India with counselling psychologists from Karma Care delivering sessions in urban schools throughout Delhi. And as before, we've published a couple of papers on these findings, and essentially what we found is that for Dove Confident Me, the 5-session version in India, we found significant improvements in body esteem and disordered eating behaviours immediately post-intervention and a 3-month follow-up. So those of you that can remember the UK trial that we did with the 5-session, we were seeing positive improvements in these constructs up to 6 months later. These are very similar findings. The only reason we didn't find effects at 6 months is because we didn't actually test at 6 months. We don't actually know if these effects would have been sustained at 6 months, and that was purely lack of resource that allowed us to not be able to follow up for that length of time. But seeing these results at 3 months was really, really promising and kind of showed us that with cultural adaptation, we can pick up Dove confidently, adapt it, and use it in a new cultural context. So really, really promising results from that trial. So after this trial, we were super excited that it was working in urban India, but we then wanted to know, well, could it work in rural India where the cultural context is quite different, not least because typically lessons are taught in Hindi, but also it's a very low resource part of the world in that there might not be presentation slides that are easily shown in the classroom, so some of the videos might not work. So we had to think really creatively of how can we take Dove Confident Me that is quite reliant on a PowerPoint presentation and videos to keep people engaged. How can we adapt that for an environment where those technological advances are maybe not possible? And my colleagues worked with UNICEF and with Embassy Media Action and developed the content for Dove Confident Me and created a set of comic books. So they created a series of 6 comic books to be read in the classroom, using some key characters from a popular cartoon in India, and basically brought the messages to life in a really low resource way by these comic books. At the end of each comic book, there was a series of activities to again bring about cognitive dissonance and get them to think critically about the media. So a really innovative way to take what we know from Dove Confident Me that works and completely reformat it to suit a different cultural context. This again was a really effective intervention, and we found the Dove Confident Me comic book version in India. We found significant improvements in body esteem, skin shade satisfaction, reductions in eating pathology and gender stereotyping, again at 1 week and 3-month follow-up. So this is really an example of how you can completely recreate an intervention. I mean, this is not an easy or a fast process. This took a series of at least 6 months, perhaps even more, to get right, and involved a lot of interaction with young people to check that it was working. But it's keeping those same components of Dove Confident Me and applying them in a new way. So that was a really exciting project, which is where our work ended in India, at least for the moment. And now I'd like to move on to case study 2. So from around 2020 to around 2022, we had an opportunity to collaborate with UNICEF again, but this time in the Indonesian context. So once again, my colleagues and I went out to Indonesia and formed some partnerships with the University of Indonesia and met with our UNICEF collaborators. And the real goal here was to take Dove Confidently and embed it within a UNICEF life skills education curriculum. So in Indonesia, social and emotional learning and health learning in schools is typically delivered by UNICEF through their life skills education program, and they have a series of sessions throughout the academic year where they talk about various and very varied topics. And the goal here with this partnership was to embed Confidently within that life skills educational programming. So we essentially took the single session version of Confidently and reformatted it and revamped it so it fit within this kind of already embedded system within Indonesian schools. So through much hard work and dedication, we reformatted a lot of the Dove Confidently resources, made them applicable to the Indonesian audience, which similarly to India included things such as more examples regarding skin shade, which was not mentioned in the UK version, and then also like dropping metaphors that may not land in an Indonesian setting. And you'll see here on the left-hand side, it visually looks quite different from the original Dove Confidently, and that's again because we were kind of constrained by what the UNICEF's life skills education programming looked like. So it took a double adaptation for the cultural context, but also adapting it so it could fit into this established program of work that was happening across Indonesian schools. So once we were happy with the intervention, we went into schools and we started delivering it. And once again, we've written research papers about this if you're interested in knowing more. And in terms of our effects, unfortunately, on this occasion, we found no effects. So not what we expected, especially after such positive results in India, and we can only hypothesize as to why this might be. The kind of front runner of reasons why for me is that it could be that it was the single session intervention that we were testing. So this could indicate that a more intensive intervention is needed in a culture where psychosocial topics like bullying and are being spoken about. So in Indonesia, rote learning is very commonplace, and it might just be that it's just a stretch too far to expect to find body image or eating pathology to change in Indonesia with just one single lesson, and it might be that a more sustained series of lessons where children have time to kind of process and digest some new terminology and new ways of thinking is required to create change. That's one reason why we might not have found effects. The second reason, which I'm sure has some at least role in why we found no effects, is that this research took place during the height of COVID-19. So there was a lot of disruption happening around the lesson, and just disruption to the normal routine of young people. Their mental health was likely affected, and there was a real mix of delivery modalities and delivering single sessions. So some children were being homeschooled, some children were having lessons via Teams, some people going into the classrooms, and for some children it was a mix of kind of lockdown and opening up, which I think we all remember so well. So all of those factors together likely contributed to these kind of no effects that we're seeing in Indonesia. However, I present it as a case study because I really like to portray the idea that this stuff kind of always works. It doesn't, as much as we might try. But certainly a lot of learnings came out of this trial that we can take forward and certainly learn from. Okay, I just wanted to end now on just some key things that I've learned along the way. So it's been, like I said, this is a 12-year body of work, and if I was to do it all again, what are the key things I think about? So first of all, when thinking about developing a school-based program, collaboration with key stakeholders, including dissemination partners, is very, very important. Us at CAR have the knowledge of what we know might be the active ingredients and what might be the risk factors to target in these interventions, but what we lack is the ability to get developed programs into the hands of those that need them. And that's where DOVE come in, and that's why our partnership works so well. We could sit in our office and develop the most effective program ever, but if we have no pathway to impact, if there's no pathway to getting these programs into the hands of teachers, it's actually not effective at all. So I would say having that multidisciplinary, multi-stakeholder team is absolutely crucial, and particularly when you're thinking about design and making it acceptable to young people, it's really great to have people that can design these things in a way that will land well with young people. So it's not just about the kind of the psychology and the science behind it. It's the team as a whole that really makes this a successful partnership. Second learning is that teachers can be fantastic facilitators, and training and buy-in is absolutely essential. So as I mentioned at the start, when we ran that trial comparing teachers to kind of body image experts, it was really humbling to see teachers actually do a really fantastic job at delivering this stuff and bring their skills as a teacher to the program in a way that body image experts never could. So I think that's really promising when we think about scalability of school-based programs, is to be thinking about how we can make sure it's delivered by teachers. And buy-in is really essential. So what we found worked really well in trying to roll DOVE confidently out in the UK is finding that that person within the school setting or at a regional level that is really passionate about body image education or eating disorder prevention, and really using them as an insider to really push out the importance of this topic. We found was just critical at times to getting this research off the ground. Thirdly, mixed gender classes are effective and are seen as beneficial, but must be done with care. So we always toyed with the idea of whether they should be run in single gender groups, but typically children report to us that they like hearing both perspectives or all the perspectives of different genders, but I think culturally it changes the extent of which people are splitting up genders. So there's some activities that girls just feel more comfortable just talking to girls about, and I think we need to be mindful of that and build that into the design. The program itself is thinking about when is it appropriate to have mixed genders and when is it more appropriate to separate out genders for kind of comfort and acceptability of the program. In terms of resources, we need to balance depth, examples and explanations with brevity. So we know from working closely with teachers that some teachers just want to know what to say. They don't need to understand the how or the what or the why behind a program. They just want to see, okay, what do I need to say in the class? What's going to be effective? I'll go ahead and do that. Whereas there's other teachers that really want to understand the nuance and the examples and really want a lot of support before they deliver this lesson. And this is just, individual differences. But it's quite difficult to design one program that does both of those things. It's got to be easy to pick up and use. It's also got to include enough explanation and examples and background information for those that are inclined to read it. So just simple things like the formatting of the teacher resources. You need to be able to quickly pick up and learn the key components that include the more detailed stuff as well. And that was a challenge for many a month to get the formatting right. Number 5, cultural adaptation is essential. I think I've made that clear throughout the presentation. I really wish there was one version of DOVE confidently that we could say it works globally and no more edits required. However, I think it's really clear from the research that we've done that we need to be continually using the baseline tools that we have and have developed in the UK, but really working with collaborators in individual countries to make sure it's really going to work and land and be effective and accessible for the audience. Excuse me. So making those cultural changes to ensure it still remains effective in different cultural contexts. Number 6, creativity is needed to bring key messages to life in resource-limited regions. I think the comic book version of DOVE confidently is a really good example of that. the messages that are within Dove Confident Me in an accessible way in regions of the world that might not be set up to play 2-minute videos, for example, in the classroom. My last point is perhaps no surprise, given that I'm a researcher at heart, is that research, evaluation and ongoing development is crucial. I think Dove Confident Me, although developed for the first time in collaboration with CAR back in 2012, every few years it goes under a new round of revisions and development to make sure it is still current and responsive to kind of emerging trends in body literature. So back in 2012, for example, we were talking about things that young people might see in magazines, and that's completely off the agenda now. It's all about social media. So it's a constantly evolving program, even within the UK context, and even more so in the international context. It needs that constant revamp of the evaluation. Is it still relevant? Is it still doing what it sets out to do? So I can't emphasize enough the importance of research, and like we saw in the Indonesian context, something that we felt quite confident going into the trial with didn't work for whatever reason. So ongoing evaluation is super, super important. Just wanted to end on a real big highlight of this partnership with the Dove Samsung project. And that's just to say that over the last 22 years now, we have reached 136 million people with evidence-based resources. Not all of these are done confidently, but done confidently certainly makes up a significant portion of this amount of people. So it just kind of demonstrates the huge impact that we're able to have with this kind of academic partnership. I'm going to end there because I think I might have gone over time for my half. I just wanted to end with a big thank you for welcoming us to this session, and end with a few links. So if you want to know more about Dove Confident Me, there's a little link there at the top. To learn more about CAR, there's our link to our website. And if you want to collaborate, please, I'd love to hear from you. Please do get in touch, and maybe there's a Dove Confident Me South Korea in the making, which would be love to talk about if possible. So yes, thank you so much. My last slide is just all the references I talked to you about. If you want to do a deep dive into anything I spoke about, there's all the links there. And with that, I think we're ready to move on to questions with myself and with Ben. Thank you. Hi everyone.
Hello, hi Kirsty, hi Beth, hello, welcome. My name is Sarah. I'm going to be interpreting today's question session. Jeannie is here with us. Unfortunately, her laptop has some issues, so she can't show her face. Just FYI. Yeah, but we're all here.
너무 잘 들었습니다. 저는 이 트랜스크립션 번역 작업을 하면서 한번 봤으면서도 다시 한번 들으면서 굉장히 많은 걸 생각하고 굉장히 영감과 되게 프랙티컬한 면들을 많이 가르쳐주는 내용이어서 너무 유용했습니다. 여러분 질문거리가 아마 많으실 거예요. 저도 그랬거든요. 질문하실 게 있으면 여기 채팅창에 써주셔도 되고 아니면 이제 생각을 해두셨다가 직접 말씀을 해주셔도 됩니다. 여기 참석하신 분들이 질문거리를 좀 생각해 볼 수 있게 한 3, 4분 정도 있다가 질의응답 시작한다고 좀 전해주세요.
So, Kirsty and Beth, the way in which how we're going to proceed with the questions is that, first of all, we're going to wait for some people to type up their questions on the chat box. So we'll give about 3 to 4 minutes and then start. So when people are more than welcome to open their cameras and ask you a question directly, either in English and Korean, and I'll help with the translation in between. Actually, I'll start with one question. Really impressive talks from you, Kirsty and Beth. I think it was the first session that we saw was Beth's series. The programs that you have for students, I think it's very remarkable and very interesting and very important. But I think especially in adolescents, the feedback that they receive from outside of school, so that's on social media or through their peers, can really affect and alter the way in which we think about our body image. So I was wondering if he also is currently conducting or have conducted some longitudinal successful outcomes from these programs. I know you mentioned you do like post 1 week and post 6 weeks, but have you done, let's say, 5 years or post graduation?
So we don't. Kirsty can speak more about the Dove program specifically, but at the center, to my knowledge, no, we haven't followed anywhere near that long. And internationally, there's no research that's followed that far out. So yeah, it's a great point that I think it's important to keep in mind that what's taught in school isn't just about peer dynamics or school-based dynamics. There's also opportunity in these programs to include media literacy and social media literacy specifically. So that's a key point to remember. But unfortunately, we just don't have anywhere near that kind of longitudinal evidence at this point.
Right. 네, 우선 제가 먼저 질문을 던졌고요. 제 질문의 취지는 베스님께서 이제 보여주신 연구에 보면 이제 특히 청소년기 어린 아이들에게 여러 가지 프로그램을 제공하고 있는데 그게 굉장히 임프레시브하다는 이제 말씀을 이제 드렸고, 그렇지만 이제 그 나이대 같은 경우에는 이제 학교에서 배우는 것뿐만 아니라 그 밖에서 뭐 인스타그램이라든지 여러 가지 소셜 미디어를 통해서 본인의 바디 이미지를 많이 생각하는 경우가 있기 때문에 어떠한 성공적인 프로그램의 결과를 위해서 결과를 측정하기 위해서 좀 장기간 동안 몇 년 이상이 이 학생들을 팔로우를 했는지를 물어봤습니다. 했더니 이제 아직까지 그 길게 진행된 연구는 없다고 했고요. 그렇지만 이 프로그램에 학교에서 배우는 것뿐만 아니라 여러 가지 이제 미디어에 대한 이제 이해도도 같이 포함을 하려고 한다고 말씀 주셨습니다.
관련해서 요즘 소셜미디어에 관한 논의라고 해야 될까요? 굉장히 전 글로벌하게 많잖아요.
네.
이미 호주 같은 경우라든가 또 다른 나라들이 청소년 소셜미디어 사용을 금지한 곳도 있고, 영국도 논의 중인 걸로 알고 있는데 아마 그럴 거라고 생각되는데요. 그 부분에 대해서 또 궁금하다고 말씀 주셨으면 좋겠어요.
네. So we have another question from the floor. So as you're probably aware, and I think it's similar what's happening in the UK as well, but in Australia recently they banned social media in teenage students. So we wanted to ask you, as people who run these programs for teenagers, what's your opinion on that?
Beth, I will let you take this one if that's okay.
Absolutely. I think it's pretty early to have an opinion in terms of how it's playing out, particularly in Australia. I know some of the concerns that have been raised are definitely worth considering. For example, when youth might encounter problematic content like bullying or eating disorder content, that kind of thing. Because we know that youth will get around these bans. And so when they then encounter that content, they're probably less likely to turn to parents, teachers, or adults to discuss it because it's not allowed. So now the dynamic is problematic in the sense that adults could help mitigate that type of content, but youth will most likely be reluctant to turn to adults because of these bans. So that's definitely been an issue. There's also not really great evidence around the long-term effects of social media engagement on mental health. We know much more about body image and how body image is affected by exposure to appearance ideals. But in terms of depression and anxiety, the evidence of social media impacts is pretty equivocal at this point. So the bans seem not to be really aligned with the research evidence. So those are concerns, especially when you think about access that marginalized youth may now no longer have to communities that might support them. So these might be gender diverse youth, or other marginalized groups that can no longer connect with communities in areas where they're cut off due to these bans. So obviously that's much broader than our focus on eating disorders, but it is a broader context to think about.
May I ask why you think, or the research you've mentioned, think that young adults may be reluctant to turn to adults?
So if it's a ban, if they're restricted from access and they have then used like a VPN or some kind of other hack to get around the ban, they're basically breaking the rules.
Right.
So they would probably be more reluctant then to turn to an adult to say, "Hey, I know I wasn't supposed to be doing this, but I was."
Right.
And now I've seen this terrible behavior and I need to talk about it. So they're probably going to be more reluctant to do that because it exposes their rule breaking.
Right. Thank you. 우선 네, 답변을 드리겠습니다. 우선 소셜미디어와 그다음 밴 관련해서 여러 가지 코멘트를 주셨는데 우선 베 선생님께서 하신 이제 중요한 말씀은 아직까지는 이 소셜미디어 그러니까 이제 금지함으로써 이 득이 있다는 연구가 조금 부족한 것 같다고 말씀을 주셨습니다. 이제 그렇기 때문에 본인이 이거에 대해서 아직 코멘트를 하는 건 조금 이른 감이 있다고 말씀을 주셨고요. 근데 그 대표적인 이제 그 이유가 두 가지가 있었는데, 첫 번째는 그러니까 소셜미디어를 이제 특히 청소년들이 어떠한 그 서로 소통을 하고 특히나 만약에 뭐 LGBTQ나 아니면 여러 가지 그런 본인이 속하는 커뮤니티 소통의 창으로 이용했다가 이거가 이제 금지가 된다면 이 친구들이 더 이상 갈 데가 없다고 이제 말씀하셨습니다. 그래서 이 친구들이 절대 이제 어른들한테 도움을 요청을 하거나 하지 않을 거라고 예상을 하기 때문에 어떻게 보면은 이 청소년들이 소통할 수 있는 창이 이제 단절됐다는 게 조금 아쉬운 점이 된 거라고 말씀하셨고요. 그리고 여태까지 지금 밝혀지고 알려진 연구들을 통해서 이 길게 롱텀하게 이 소셜미디어가 정신 어떠한 그 질병을 유발시킨다는 거에 대한 아직 긴 연구는 지금 나오고 있지 않은 상황이라서 이거에 대한 부분에 대한 코멘트는 조금 아직은 이른 것 같다라고 정리해서 말씀해 주셨습니다.
젊은 성인.
Sorry.
젊은 성인. VPN. 해킹 번역 안 하셨, 통역.
네네네. 그래서 이제 제가 추가로 여쭤봤어요. 왜, 아이들이, 이런 소셜미디어 밴을 통해서 어른들한테, 도움을 요청하지 않을 것 같다고 하니까, 이게 본인이 하면 안 되는 행동이기 때문에, 뭐, VPN이나 해킹을 통해서 해야 되는 상황이기 때문에, 그 자체가 이제 어른들을 그걸 질타할 수 있다는 생각을 해서, 아마 더더욱이나 어른들한테 도움을 요청하지 않을 것 같다라고 말씀 주셨습니다.
네. 베스트 교수님이 더 하실 말씀 있으신 것 같은데요?
Yeah. Beth, do you have more to add?
Yeah, just to add as well, this is not my idea, but it's one to repeat, is that rather than regulating children and putting that on the users who are children, the other way to think about this is to force social media companies to be more accountable. So, that we have good evidence that they are using these platforms to, algorithmically to push out content that sometimes is harmful to youth. And so making sure or passing regulations that focus on the companies rather than children and imposing that burden on families and schools is another really important conversation to be had.
Yeah, absolutely. 추가적으로 말씀하신 거는 어쨌든 이 사용자, 그러니까 어린 아이들을 쓰지 못하게 이렇게 질타를 하거나 아니면 제한을 하는 거가 아니라 이 소셜미디어 회사들한테 조금 더 책임감을 있게끔 만드는 거가 조금 더 중요할 것 같다고 말씀해 주셨고, 왜냐하면 어쨌든 이 소셜미디어 회사들이 하는 거는 이익 목적도 크고 그다음에 이제 알고리즘을 통해서 아이들을 더 유도하는 거기 때문에 그런 부분, 정책적인 부분에 있어서 조금 레귤레이션이 필요할 것 같다까지 말씀해 주셨습니다.
네, 맞는 말씀인 게 아마 호주에서 이걸 밀어붙이는 그런 애드보커시 하시는 분들도 다 그쪽을 목적을 하고 계시더라고요. 얼마 전에 이걸 또 말씀드리고 싶은데 얼마 전에 그 바디 이미지 러라는 책을 쓰신 법학자 메릴린 브롬버그 인터뷰를 해서 기사를 쓴 적이 있어요. 그래서 그분하고 이 문제에 대해서 얘기를 나눴다고 좀 전해주셨으면 좋겠습니다.
그분 저자 이름이 뭐라고요, 지니님?
M. 브롬버그,
아, 네.
메릴린 브롬버그, 바디 이미지 러라는 책에 쓰신.
네. So Jeannie is also going to comment that this is a very hot topic, and especially in Australia, I think the advocacy group is also trying to push for social media companies to change. And Jeannie recently conducted an interview with a lawyer in Australia named Madeline Mbrook, who wrote the book Body Image Law. Yep, I think we have another question. 혹시 지니님 좀 읽어주실 수 있으실까요? 제가
네네네. 한 분이 인도에서 인도 그 컨트리사이드에서 만화책 시리즈 만든 것이 너무 흥미로웠다고 말씀하시면서 환경에 맞춰서 다른 방식으로 접근한 것이지만 결과적으로 정말 좋은 자료였던 것 같은데 혹시 이렇게 만화책 시리즈를 문화별로 만들어서 배포하는 거에 대해서 어떻게 생각하시는지 궁금하다고 말씀하셨습니다. 근데 제가 생각해서 저 출판사 출신이니까 굉장히 많은 자원이 필요할 것입니다. 아무튼 질문 부탁드립니다.
So we had another comment from the floor. She says, thank you. I really loved the insight you gave us. And especially the comic series made in India was really interesting and impressive. And was wondering if you had other plans to either publish it or something similar in different cultural and regions as well.
Yeah, great question. And I agree. The comic books are really innovative in terms of pushing out body confidence messaging. At the moment, as far as I'm aware, in terms of the Dove Self-Esteem Project, there's no immediate plans to be kind of translating them into different cultural contexts. I think with that intervention specifically, it was built on a well-known kind of comic book series known in India. So how well it would be a direct translation, it might not be quite, might not work because these characters are already kind of known and loved by children in India. But the format certainly shows promise. And yeah, I think Dove are always thinking of ways to reach new contexts, and with that being a successful one, I mean, who knows? But at the moment, there's no immediate plan.
Yeah. Thank you. 우선 좋은 질문이라고 말씀해 주셨고, 아직 당장 이제 출판할 그런 계획은 이제 없다고는 말씀하셨습니다. 인도에서 이게 흥행할 수 있었던 이유가 이제 이미 기존에 인도 어린아이들이 잘 읽고 자주 읽고 유명한 만화책 시리즈를 이제 차용을 했다고 합니다. 그래서 이미 아이들이 그 만화책 시리즈에 나와 있는 주인공들을 잘 알고 있었던지라 조금 더 수월하게 이러한 만화책을 출판을 할 수가 있었고, 이거에 대한 이제 반응이 굉장히 좋았기 때문에 항상 도부는 어떠한 방식으로 다른 문화권들하고 이제 소통을 할지 계속 고민하고 있다라고 말씀해 주셨습니다.
두 번째 질문이 있네요. 이것도 수업 진행할 때 쓰는 도구들 뭐라 그래야 될까요? 어떤 활동을 하는지 이런 구체적인 활동에 대해서 질문을 하셨어요. 어린이들한테 특히 신체 이미지를 긍정적으로 돕기 위해서 어떤 수단을 하셨는지, 어떤 활동을 활용하셨는지, 뭐 보드게임과 요가를 말씀하셨는데 좀 더 구체적으로 듣고 싶다고 질문해 주셨습니다.
So in your programs, Beth and Kirsty, you mentioned that you use different tools like board games and yoga to kind of get the students engaged and to learn about body positivity. We're wondering if we can hear more about that and how that's conducted in the programs.
I'm going to ask Kirsty if you were involved in either one of those studies.
So sorry, it was the board game and what was the other one? Sorry.
Yoga.
The yoga. No, I wasn't. I can talk about a TV show that we created for 4 to 6 year olds, which is of a similar kind of vein of something quite innovative and exciting in that respect. So for so we created with a very popular YouTuber, at least here in the UK and the US, called Blippi. We worked with the creators of Blippi, so Moonbug Entertainment, who are a big production company in Los Angeles, and we worked with them to adapt their very popular series and turn it into a very popular series with the add-on of body image evidence-based content. And this was through our partnership with the Dove Self-Esteem Project, hence why we get these very large collaboration opportunities. But that's very much an iterative process of the industry are very aware of what kids find engaging, what's likely to keep them watching the TV program, what they enjoy, and then with our benefit of coming in and knowing what actually, if they say this or if they frame a question in this kind of way, it will have a certain response from the child. So it's kind of bridging those two industries of kind of academic evidence-based evidence from CAR and then bringing in the expertise of a different industry to really make something that's really powerful, that is not only going to be evidence-based and effective, but also have the reach as it does. And I imagine a similar process happened with the board game. So working with, I can't remember the company the team at Carl worked with, but using their knowledge of what makes an engaging board game and then layering on the body image content that we know to be effective in changing thoughts and behaviors.
Right, thanks. 우선 두 분 다 보드게임과 요가 프로그램에 직접 참여하진 않았다고 하셨고요. 그래서 커스티님께서는 이제 최근에 이제 4세에서 6세 이제 영유아 아이들 대상으로 TV쇼 만든 거를 말씀해 주셨습니다. 그래서 이미 이제 그 나이 때 아이들에게 유명한 이제 유튜버와 같이 협업을 했다고 합니다. 그래서 그 유튜버 시리즈 나오는 이제 그 애니메이션에 이제 같이 이제 이런 버디 이미지에 대한 주제를 같이 입혔다고 하셨고요. 그래서 그런 게 굉장히 효과적일 수밖에 없었던 이유는 아이들이 어떤 거를 굉장히 시청하는지를 좋아하는지에 대한 데이터가 이미 유튜버들은 갖고 있고, 그리고 이제 거기에다가 이제 이 학계에서 어떠한 콘텐츠가 아이들에게 바디 이미지를 높이는 데 좋을지를 알고 있기 때문에 두 영역이 같이 협업을 했을 때 좀 더 효과적으로 영유아들에게 더 이 바디 이미지에 대한 메시지를 전달할 수 있었다라고 코멘트 주셨습니다.
너무 좋은 방법인 것 같아요. 질문이 하나 더 들어왔는데요. 이거는 정말 우리나라에 되게 문화 특수적인 일입니다. 한국은 유년기 아주 어렸을 때부터 학교가 아니라 가정에서 친척이나 가족들한테 외모적인 평가를 많이 받죠. 그래서 얼마 전에 구정설이었는데 우연히 유튜브에서 그 대한 외국인 세 분이 하는 꽁트를 봤는데 유럽 분들은 서로 개인적인 코멘트를 별로 안 하신다고요. 안 하는데 인도는 우리랑 비슷하더라고요. 럭키가 말하는데 인도에서도 명절 때 모이면 서로 이렇게 외모에 대해서도 얘기하고 한다고 하는데 아무튼 그래서 이런 것들을 어렸을 때부터 가정 환경에서 접하기 때문에 학교 가기 전부터 교육이 필요한 것 같기도 하고 아이들뿐만이 아니라 성인, 학부모, 예비 부모를 대상으로도 필요할 것 같은데 그런 교육 프로젝트는 없었는지 궁금하다고 하셨습니다.
So we have another question from the comment section, and I think this is very a very important and very cultural question targeted for Koreans. So especially in Korea and also soon in India as well, a lot of people, we grew up hearing a lot of comments of our bodies, but that's part of embedded in the cultural context. So at homes, it's very common that your parents comment of your body and in a very daily basis. So sometimes we think that education on body image should start earlier, even before entering school. So the question was, do you also conduct programs for parents as well? Because we think these dialogues should start in the households as well.
Yeah, really good question, and I think highly relevant given the cultural context. Something I don't think I mentioned when I was discussing the Indian context with where we worked was that hierarchy of, it's all well and good saying, stand up to appearance-based comments, but in a culture where you're, not typically encouraged to stand up to your elders, that becomes quite problematic. So I completely agree. We need intervention at all levels throughout the life stage. I think we need to start young with very young children, especially given the evidence that, children as young as 4, at least in Western cultures, have a fear of being fat. That just shows that we need interventions at a young age, but also at the older age as well. And I think a lot of the work in body image and eating disorder prevention has been adolescents and typically young women. But I think I'd like to think at least that's starting to change because absolutely we need intervention for people of an older age as well. I've just done a study with millennial women, so these are kind of new mums and kind of mums of the future, looking at how we can shift their body image in order to create change with younger children as well. In terms of targeting parents directly, we've done a couple of studies with the Dove Self-Esteem Project, and we typically find parents can be a really tricky audience to get involved in this kind of content. For many reasons, one being that they have lots and lots of hats to wear. So they're already juggling motherhood, probably work-life balance. They're also probably got a multitude of issues that they're facing. So we do find it tricky to get parents engaged for that kind of sustained amount of time, not through lack of interest, but just because of being busy, busy women. I can certainly vouch for that being a relatively new mother as well. So we definitely need more of it. There is some good indications that they can be effective, but it's really making sure that parents are aware of where the resources are and making sure it's highlighted as an important issue to learn about.
Yeah, thank you. 네, 우선 답변 말씀드리겠습니다. 우선 인도와 마찬가지로 한국 같은 경우에도 굉장히 수직적인 이제 문화를 이제 가지고 있어서 누군가 자기 외모에 대해서 말을 했을 때 그거에 대해서 이렇게 특히 나이 많은 사람에서 그거에 대해서 이렇게 반항하는 게 쉽지 않다는 문화를 잘 인지하고 있다고 말씀해 주셨습니다. 그래서 비록 지금 본인들이 진행하고 있는 프로그램은 청소년 아이들에게 조금 더 타겟을 하고 있지만 이러한 인터벤션, 어떻게 말하면은 이제 교육이 모든 전령대와 이제 모든 생애 주기에 다 필요하겠다라고 말씀을 이제 주셨고요. 그래서 지금 진행하고 있는 또 어떤 프로그램이 밀레니얼 워먼이라고 해서 조금 이제 젊은 엄마들이나 아니면 이제 앞으로 엄마가 될 그런 타겟들을 대상으로 이러한 대화를 시작을 하고 있다라고 말씀을 주셨고, 그리고 이제 특히나 이 학부모들 대상으로 이런 교육 프로그램을 운영하는 게 중요함에도 불구하고 굉장히 어려운 이유가 이미 학부모들은 이제 뭐 엄마이어서 하고도 돈도 벌고 여러 가지의 역할들을 하루 종일 이제 수행하고 있기 때문에 조금 그분들이 이렇게 챙길 것이 많고 좀 부담될 수 있다. 그래서 현실적으로 아직까지는 어려움이 있지만 굉장히 필요하겠다라고 코멘트 해주셨습니다.
네, 지금 바로 올라온 질문이 있는데 제가 생각하고 있던 질문하고 연결돼 있거든요. 말씀을 드리면 여기 도브 컨피던트 미 프로그램의 특징적인 부분이 직접 학교에서 아이들을 가르치는 선생님들이 이제 나서는 부분이잖아요. 근데 이 부분에 대해서 국내 이걸 적용했을 때 어려운 점이 크게 두 가지가 있는데, 하나는 그 유튜브에 이런 영상 있잖아요. 영국의 학생들이 한국 학교로 와가지고 이제 생활을 경험하는 그런 유튜브 영상들이 있긴 한데, 한국은 굉장히 입시 위주로 되어 있어가지고 이런 교육을 할 수 있는 여건이 굉장히 부족할 뿐만 아니라 선생님들이 굉장히 오버버든돼 있잖아요. 그래서 제가 인스타그램에 이 세션에 관한 그 4가지 질문 이걸 올렸더니 그 거식증을 앓고 있는 한 10대 친구가 저한테 장문에 톡을 보내줬어요. 근데 그분이 선생님이 할 수는 없을 것이다. 선생님은 이미 부담이 많다라고 이제 청소년 특유의 그 경험을 바탕으로 저한테 얘기를 하시더라고요. 근데 그 점 관련해서 여기 채팅창에 질문에 써주신 분도 교사가 직접 이 수업을 맡게 한다면 교사 교육도 필요할 텐데 어떤 식으로 교사 교육을 시키셨는지 궁금하다고 말씀 주셨습니다.
So the next question is more specific about running the programs from Dove to the students. So as far as we understand, it's the teachers in the classrooms who conduct these programs. That is a very interesting concept for us because in Korea, I think a lot of teachers and perhaps in the UK as well are very overburdened and they already have a lot of responsibilities to look after. And especially in countries like Korea, where it's highly competitive, a lot of the curriculum is very much oriented towards studies and getting into good university and so and so. So we want to know, how are you able to train the teachers in the classrooms about these programs and delivering the importance of these subjects on a practical level?
Yeah, no, another really good question, and it's a real challenge. I think in every context we work, we see crowded timetables, which are often much more geared towards getting those academic results as opposed to that kind of holistic learning, of which kind of body image, eating disorder prevention would fall into. So that's kind of one of the, well, it is the key reason we developed those two programs. So that single session, 45-minute minimum lesson that is more likely to get used in the classroom, although less effective, versus the 5 session, which schools that maybe have a really key person within the school community who's really passionate about this kind of learning and maybe has the capacity to say, actually, no, we need the 5 session, or perhaps it's been highlighted in the school as a particular issue amongst their children. It could be that that would kind of encourage them more towards the 5 lesson version, which we know to be more effective. But realistically, we know that that is always going to be a really tricky thing to fit into the school calendar. So it is hard and it varies from school to school and region to region. And sometimes it can vary by what's been highlighted in the news most recently as being, the key hot topic for young children. What I will say is we haven't ever evaluated this type of intervention, but something that has been called for in the field is this whole school approach to body image. So that's less about having these very set lessons about body image, but more about bringing in the key messages like across the school curriculum. So for in home economics, where we learn about how to cook, we don't talk about good foods and bad foods. We just talk about foods and what, fuels our bodies. And in biology, we would talk about bodies of different shapes and sizes. And in art class, we would, think about inclusive art, for example. So that becomes less of a burden in the school curriculum, but more about a kind of a school culture where kind of everybody is valued, which could be embedded perhaps more efficiently, but again would take training and kind of at a group level, commitment to taking that kind of approach. But I think it's one that's worthy of some more work and evaluation for sure.
It's more of a subtle way of kind of restructuring the narrative around bodies through different subjects. That's very interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm sorry, what was the example for the arts class again? I know you said for home economics.
Just kind of appreciating different sizes of bodies within
Right, okay.
art and how
Right.
maybe appearance ideals have changed in artistic representation
Right.
over time, and
Yep.
kind of critically thinking about that, I think could be really valuable. And just kind of,
Right.
yeah, peppering the content throughout the kind of life of being
Right.
at school.
Thank you. 우선 답변을 내주셨습니다. 그래서 사실 이렇게 아이들의 어떤 입시 위주에 관련되고 또 굉장히 이렇게 많은 게 쏟아져 내리는 그런 그 시간표에 대한 어떤 학생들의 삶은 영국과 한국 좀 많이 비슷한 것 같다고 말씀을 주셨고요. 그래서 대부분 이게 조금 성공했던 케이스들은 그 학교 내에 좀 이러한 이슈에 대해서 좀 더 이렇게 목소리를 높이고 싶어 하는 선생님들이 있을 때 조금 더 효과적이었다고 말씀을 주셨고, 확실히 그냥 한 세션 45분짜리 한 세션 하는 것보다 5세션을 이어나갔던 게 조금 더 효과적이었다고 말씀해 주셨습니다. 그렇지만 이 모든 이제 학교들이 이러한 주제에 대해서 오픈마인드는 아니기 때문에 좀 학교 바이 학교인 것 같다고 말씀을 주셨고, 그리고 이제 뉴스에서 이제 어떠한 이제 아이들에 관련된 어떠한 토픽들이 제일 많이 다루고 있냐에 따라서도 조금 이 프로그램이 학교에서 성공적이었다, 아니었다라고 평가할 수가 있다고 말씀해 주셨는데, 추가적으로 조금 더 이 강조하고 싶으신 부분은, 따로 이렇게 세션을 빼서 아이들에게 이 긍정적인 이제 몸의 인식을 이제 알리는 것이 아니라 전반적으로 모든 과목에서 그러한 이제 대화나 그러한 이해를 시키려고 한다고 합니다. 그래서 예를 들어서 가정 시간에 그동안 저희가 뭐 몸에 좋은 음식과 나쁜 음식 이렇게 이분법적으로 나눴다면, 그러한 좋고 나쁨을 떠나서 그냥 음식에 대한 이야기를 한다든지, 그리고 생물이나 생물 시간에도 이제 뭐 건강한 몸, 안 건강한 몸이란 대신에 몸에 대해서 좀 전반적으로 이해를 시킨다든지, 그리고 이제 미술 시간에도 이제 역사적으로 미의 기준이 많이 달라져 왔고 몸에 대해서 그런 평가적인 말을 하는 것이 아니라 모든 사이즈를 우리가 다 아름답다고 볼 수 있는 그런 눈을 키우려고 하는 조짐이 좀 있다고 했습니다. 그래서 이렇게 따로 이러한 세션들을 드리버하기 어려운 기관들에서는 선생님들이 그 과목 에 나와 있는 컨텐츠를 이야기를 할 때 새로운 시각으로 아이들이 조금 몸에 대해서 긍정적으로 인식할 수 있는 방법들이 중요한 것 같다라고 코멘트 주셨습니다.
얘기를 들어보니까 아예 교과서를 만드는 그 단계부터 개입을 했어야 되는 거였네요. 그쵸?
네.
거기서 네, 그랬던 거였네요. 지금 질문이 세 가지가 더 있는데, 일단 메디님이 해주신 것부터 지금 제가 생각하고 있던 거랑 연결돼서 이것부터 한 다음에 다시 이제 학교 밖으로 넘어가겠습니다. 여기서 이제 혼성반과 이제 단일 그 여학생반, 남학생반이 이렇게 있는데 어떤 교실에서도 효과가 있었다고 평가하셨는지도 궁금하고, 어, 남자아이들의 태도를 말씀하셨는데 제가 이 얘기를 들은 적이 있어요. 예전에 작년 봄에 국내 어떤 화장품 회사에서 진행했던 프로그램, 교육 프로그램, 학교 기반 교육 프로그램 운영했던 분들이 이제 어려웠던 경우들로 얘기를 하셨는데, 남녀 아이들이 있을 때 아주 어린 초등학교 교실에서 남자아이들이 성적인 장난을 한다는 거예요. 어떤 그 단어가 보여도. 그러니까 이거를 선생님이 어떻게 넘겨야 될 거가 항상 챌린지가 된다는 거예요. 이런 부분이 어땠는지 너무 궁금합니다.
Yeah. So the next question is also about the program that you run at schools. So you mentioned about running it in co-ed classrooms and also in either boys only and girls only classrooms. In your case, which session was most successful? Was it the co-ed or was it in the single sex? The reason why we ask this question is we've heard from different similar cases where if boys are involved, they would throw very cheeky, raunchy comments, which can make a lot of people uncomfortable and often positions a teacher not knowing how to respond to those comments.
Sure. So we haven't run them as whole sessions as just with girls or just with boys. So what we typically do is we run them because in the UK at least and in the other contexts we've worked, the vast majority of schools are co-educational. So that's typically where we see the programs being used. And what we aim to do is for some sensitive topics. So if we think about the 5-session Confident Me, session 1 is about appearance ideals, and that's when we get the students themselves to come up with the appearance ideal, and then that's where we would potentially see those kind of comments that you're seeing come up. So, what does society tell us a girl would look like? That's when we have seen in the past those comments from kind of different genders come out that are not particularly helpful. And it's particularly lesson 1 where we often find those small groups in single gender groups to be most effective, just for kind of reducing some of that. So if the boys are going to discuss that, they're doing it in their own gender groups, in small groups, and hopefully can be caught before it gets to a kind of classroom level. So that's kind of what I was meaning by co-educational settings. It works, but just being really mindful of when single gender groups might be more appropriate for some of those conversations. And I think the comment about how to deal with that from the teacher's perspective, I think this is where we've seen in our research that kind of those teacher skills really come to the fore, and that they have much more experience in dealing with that than, say, a researcher or someone who's external coming in. And that's where maybe the power of the teacher comes in being able to kind of manage that better than us. But that's not to say it's not useful to give some guidance to teachers about things that we typically see come up. So when we have these resources for teachers for the Dove Self-Esteem Project programs in schools, we have a lot of information on the website about how do you respond to that, because it can be quite a challenging situation to be in. So we try and provide teachers as much kind of guidance in that respect as we can, to ensure they feel kind of confident and equipped to deal with that. And we often find that just practicing helps you kind of get used to it and be ready to kind of mitigate those issues. So yeah, separating out groups and training we find go a long way, because typically schools are not very we're already asking them to deliver this lesson, layering that of okay, and you also need to split genders. They're more likely to kind of be like, no, we don't want to do it at all. So it's finding ways to make sure we get the schools involved, and also protect students for those difficult conversations by maybe doing smaller group activities when needed.
Right, thank you. 네, 우선 대부분의 여태까지 진행하셨던 프로그램은 다 혼성 교실에서 이루어졌다고 했는데요. 특히 그 혼성 교실에서 여러 가지 토픽을 다루는데 첫 번째 주로 다룬 토픽이 사회에서 생각하는 뭐 이상적인 이제 남자 또는 여성이 무엇인가 이런 이제 대화들을 시작한다고 합니다. 근데 이제 그런 대화들을 이제 시작을 할 때는 소규모로 이제 분산돼서 시작을 한다고 했고 그 소규모는 다 이제 성별이 같은 학생들끼리 꾸려왔다고 했기 때문에 설령 그런 좀 이렇게 좋지 않은 코멘트들이 오고 가고 했을 때 그게 이제 각자 그 같은 성별에서 그런 이야기들이 이제 오고 간다라고 말씀해 주셨습니다. 그래서 그랬을 때 조금 더 이러한 이야기들이 이제 나간 조금 효과적인 것 같다고 말씀해 주셨고요. 그다음에 이제 추가적으로 이제 그런 이제 남학생들이 이래서 뭐 성적인 발언을 한다고 했을 때 그런 선생님들이 어떻게 태도를 취할까에 대해서도 이제 영국에서 그런 비슷한 경험을 이제 많고 선생님들이 그런 걸 호소를 하고 있고 특히 도부에서는 이제 그럴 때 어떻게 대응하면 될지에 대한 리소스를 적극적으로 제공을 하고 있다고 말씀을 해주셨습니다.
Oh, could I just
네.
add as well? Sorry
Yes.
to
No, it's fine.
something I didn't say, but I think is important to this question is that when we have run these co-educational classes before, and we've done like small focus groups after to find out, what did the students like, what did they not like. We weren't expecting this response, but we actually had a lot of the boys say that it was really useful for them to hear from the girls the pressure that they face, and it's made them sort of think more critically about how they maybe stand up for girls or some of the things that they might say to girls. So I think there is actually real benefit as well. It's not all about breaking them up. I think that boys are actually getting a lot to hear, and probably vice versa as well, but it came through really clearly with boys that they hadn't really thought about it from the girls' perspective before. So I think it can be really powerful as well to have them together for most of the lesson.
Thank you for the additional comments. 추가적으로 말씀 주신 거는 그 혼성 교실에서 이제 소규모 액티비티를 진행을 했을 때 특히나 이제 마지막에 이제 각각 그 성별 그룹에서 서로 이제 발표를 하는데 남자아이들이 이제 이런 세션을 이제 끝나고 많은 걸 배웠다고 했습니다. 특히나 이 여학생들이 굉장히 많은 이제 그런 이제 외모에 대한 프레셔나 아니면 스트레스를 이제 갖고 있다는 걸 미처 몰랐다는 거를 이제는 알게 됐다고 말하는 경우들이 있어서 아마 이제 그건 여학생들도 마찬가지일 텐데 서로가 서로에 배울 수 있는 좋은 기회가 되는 것 같다고 말씀해 주셨습니다.
네. 그 다음에는 아까 질문에 이어서 이거는 청소년과 학생들 넘어서서 혹시 이런 교육을 학교 기반이 아니라 예를 들어서 뭐 섭식장애를 다루는 의료진이나 치료진이나 당사자나 가족을 위해서 이런 교육을 계획하신 적이 있으신지 궁금하다고 하셨습니다.
So additionally, we also have another question for you guys running this program. Have you also attempted to run this program targeted towards physicians or healthcare practitioners who work with eating disorder patients or families with eating disorders? So outside of schools, through different targeted groups of people, with ED.
I think I can answer for Kirsty in terms of Dove, no. But I think more generally, no. So in the sort of broader research literature, there's really not been anything that I know of. I'm not sure, Kirsty, if you know of anything. But yeah, it's unfortunately the overwhelming target, if you will, for these programs is the children themselves, not really all of the ecosystem around them. And so, arguably that's problematic. And we certainly know that healthcare professionals can unfortunately be a source of damaging comments, just like any other person in society. And they may have limited worldview, if you will, in terms of weight specifically, an over reliance on BMI, not considering holistic factors related to well-being. So that would be an absolutely positive target, I think, to work with healthcare professionals. But to date, there really hasn't been any attention paid to that in the international literature.
Yep, thank you. 아직까지는 없다고 말씀을 해 주셨고요. 그래서 아직까지는 어떤 우선순위가 이제 이런 전반적인 어린아이들이라고 말씀해 주셨지만 사실 이런 의료진들에게도 교육하는 게 중요할 것 같다고 말씀해 주셨습니다. 그 이유가 이제 간혹 의료진들이 좁은 세계관을 이제 갖고 있다든지 아니면 그 어떤 이제 아무 어른과 이제 유사하게 이제 그런 이제 그 적절치 않은 코멘트를 던질 수 있기 때문에 앞으로는 의료진들에도 이런 교육들이 좀 닿았으면 좋겠다라는 말씀을 해주셨습니다.
맞아요. 의대 교육에도 있었으면 좋겠네요. 아까 강연 중에는 이런 얘기가 있었어요. 맨 처음에 컴퓨터 TV 시작하실 때는 잡지 속에 있는 모델, 여성의 이미지가 얼마나 이게 실제가 아니라 변형되어 있는 이미지인지 같은 내용을 주로 다뤘는데 이게 시간이 지나면서 이제는 소셜미디어로 바뀌었다고 하셨잖아요. 근데 이게 정말 도브 캠페인하고 연결되는 게 제가 기억하는 도브의 그 제일 유명했던 캠페인이 그 포토샵에 관한 거였거든요. 근데 이게 이제 소셜미디어로 옮겨왔는데 질문이 뭐냐면 팬데믹이 또 되게 중요한 기점이 됐잖아요. 팬데믹 이후의 수업 내용이나 커리큘럼에 변화가 있었는지 궁금하다고 하셨습니다.
Yeah. So I think another question that we had from the floor was, has the curriculum changed since COVID, like pre and post COVID? Because we think COVID was one of the biggest events that happened in recent years when it comes to people. So I was wondering if you guys have altered any of the contents since. And I guess the implication of that question is perhaps during COVID, we had a lot more people using social medias and different ways of getting sources and so and so.
Yeah, so Confident Me is actually my colleague is currently doing the kind of the latest revamp of how it would look. It certainly does contain more social media based content than it did pre-COVID, whether that's a consequence of COVID or a change that was happening anyway that maybe just was accelerated because of COVID. I can't think of anything that's specifically coming out that we need to change due to that period of time, other than, yeah, this more online life that we now have.
Yeah. 네, 크게 많이 달라진 건 없는 것 같다 말씀해 주셨고요. 이제 만약 소셜미디어의 사용이 어떤 코비드와 같이 동반된 변화라고 했을 때는 이제 컨피던트 미란 또 다른 프로그램 중 가장 이제 최근 업데이트 버전으로 지금 진행을 하고 있다고 말씀해 주셨습니다.
또 한 가지 저는 학교 환경에서 되게 궁금한 게 영국에서는 뭐 학교 안에서 체중 재는 거를 반대하고 뭐 하고 있거나 아니면 이런 주장들이 조금 받아들여지고 있는 상황이라고 알고 있는데 한국에서는 아직 체중 재죠? 신체 검사할 때 아직도 재죠? 아마 재고 또 이거 재지 말자고 하면 아마 교육 관계자분들이 이해를 못할 거예요. 그리고 저는 최근에 들었던 얘기가 저는 급식 세대가 아니었거든요. 그래서 급식이 어떻게 진행되는지 몰랐는데 들어보니까 그 급식이 뭐 한 달 메뉴가 먼저 나오면서 그게 칼로리가 같이 공개가 된다고 하더라고요. 이런 환경에 대해서 어떻게 생각하시는지 되게 궁금합니다.
So I think it was mentioned that in the UK, in the classrooms and at schools, weighing using scales is kind of frowned upon, and most people would agree on that. But in Korean classrooms, still, when students undergo medical checkups, they still have to be weighed in classrooms. And also, we have the universal canteen system. Knowing so basically, what happens is every student we get meal provided from the government in every single public schools, and before that they published the menu for about a month in advance with all the calories attached to it. So we're wondering what your opinion or comments about those kind of practices would be comparing to the UK system.
Well, I would agree that they're both deeply problematic.
Yeah.
I don't think we have that level of calorie detail on school foods. I'm not all too familiar, but I've not heard that one. So if you have any power to change that, please do, because that doesn't sound useful to anybody. In terms of the weighing, I think there's the broader issue of why are we weighing? But I think that is probably a harder issue to tackle. I think a short-term level. I think if there's any way to be weighing in a way that the child doesn't see what they're weighing would be helpful. I would hope that their peers aren't part of that process and it's done in private. But I think just not letting the child see that number on the scale, if it is deemed critical to, know that number, for whatever reason, schools might know it would be helpful. Because for obvious reasons, we don't want children going back and comparing their number with others. So yeah, ultimately, bigger question of should we be weighing at all? And if we are, can we do it more sensitively? I don't know, Beth, if you've got anything to add to that.
Yeah, so I mean, certainly, if weighing is required, I absolutely agree with Kirsty that not providing the number to the children would be really helpful, and that could be as easy as having them step on the scale backwards, so they can't see the number. Certainly, having it done in private versus communally would be preferred. In terms of the calorie count, there has been a little bit of research done so in the US where I'm from, and I don't know if this has happened in other regions, there was a movement to put calorie counts on restaurant menus. And you still see it in some places, but there hasn't been any deterrent effect as a result. So people are not selecting lower calorie meals as a result of the information being provided. So even if you buy into the motivation that it will push people into making quote unquote healthier food choices, it's not. So yeah, the efficacy of it hasn't been demonstrated. In the context that you've described, I can't understand why, if the menu is fixed, then why are you communicating this calorie information? It seems very mysterious. So yeah, I guess challenging the practice might be the way to go. Yeah. I guess fundamentally trying to change the narrative around what is good food versus bad food, and what is food, that nourishes the body, and so forth. That's probably a more like root issue to try to get at. But yeah, the calorie count certainly isn't very helpful, particularly to children.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kirsty and Beth. 네, 답변 드리겠습니다. 우선 커스티 선생님께서 하신 말씀은 이제 칼로리와 그 다음에 아이들의 체중을 재는 거 둘 다 굉장히 문제가 많다고 말씀을 해 주셨고요. 특히나 이제 만약에 어쩔 수 없이 이제 교육 차원, 이제 아이들 차원에서 죄송합니다. 아이들 몸무게를 재야 할 때는 우리가 그 전에 질문을 해야 하는 거는 왜 몸무게를 재는가, 왜 몸무게를 알아야 하는가가 조금 중요할 것 같다고 말씀을 해주셨고, 만약에 그럼에도 불구하고 몸무게를 재는 어떤 그 프랙티스가 필요한다고 했을 때는 아이들이 그 무게를 보지 않게끔 하는 게 중요할 것 같다고 하셨고, 다른 친구들이 그걸 보지 못하게끔 하는 좀 아예 프라이버시를 좀 존중하는 게 중요할 것 같다고 말씀해 주셨습니다. 그래서 그 이후에 베스님께서는 그런 걸 할 때는 이제 아이들이 이제 체중계 거꾸로 쓰게끔 해서 보지 못하게 하는 거가 또 어떠한 방법일 수 있겠다고 말씀을 해 주셨고요. 그 다음에 이제 칼로리 카운트 관련해서는 이제 베스지 교수님께서 하신 말씀은 특히 미국에서 약간 유사하게 레스토랑에 나와 있는 이제 모든 메뉴판에 이제 칼로리를 이제 기재하는 거에 대한 어떤 그런 활동이 한동안 있었다고 했습니다. 근데 그거를 이제 보았을 때, 그때 연구진들이 보았을 때는 막상 칼로리를 다 적어 놓았다고 해도 이 소비자가 가서 더 낮은 칼로리 음식을 먹는 거는 아니라고 했습니다. 그래서 칼로리를 기재하는 것과 소위 말해 건강하게 좀 더 낮은 칼로리를 먹는 행동과 조금 무관했다라는 걸 말씀해 주셨으나 학교에서 어차피 급식에 나와 있는 이제 칼로리가 고정이라고 했을 때 굳이 칼로리를 공개를 해야 하는가라는 게 조금 의문이 든다고 말씀을 해 주셨고요. 이제 마지막으로는 이제 결국엔 이거가 아이들에게 좋은 음식과 나쁜 음식을 가리키는 게 아니라 이제 음식이 몸에 얼마나 많은 영양분을 주고 우리를 이제 이렇게 돌보게 하는 그런 수단인지에 대한 담론이 필요할 것 같다라고 마무리해 주셨습니다.
네. 이렇게 된 이유가 우리나라 전반이 어서리티가 비만을 제일 큰 건강의 문제로 생각하고 섭식장애에 대해서는 아직 문제로 생각하는 인식이 전혀 없기 때문에 아직 국가적인 정책도 마련되지 않은 거잖아요. 그래서 저희가 그 서울시랑 한번 접촉을 해서 일을 시작하진 못했죠. 제안을 한 적이 있는데 서울시조차도 얼마 전엔 그 저속노화 의사를 채용을 해서 그 저속노화 의사는 설명을 해주시면 간헐적 단식의 프로포넌트라고 보시면 돼요. 근데 그런 사람이 채용을 했고 그리고 학교 안에서의 건강 교육도 거의 다 업스트 위주로 돼 있다는 점을 말씀해 주셨으면 좋겠습니다. 네.
학교 뭐라고요, 저진희님?
그러니까
말씀해
학교 안에서도 섭식장애에 대해서는 전혀 인식이 없고 비만 활동
주세요.
위주로 네, 그렇게 짜여져 있다고.
Just another comment regarding on the culture of why perhaps in Korean public schools publicize calories is that when we talk with government bodies and how to implement these ideas of body positivity to young children, their biggest concern, health concern for children is obesity, and they see that as the biggest threat against students. So there's very little room to talk about the potentiality of students getting eating disorders. So a lot of the measurements and the tactics are surrounded with restrictive, and because they're worried about excess. And they even hired a so-called a celebrity doctor, a physician,
Slow aging.
who is very known for an advocate of intermittent fasting. So that's the current status of the schools in Korea. So if you have comments on that, please, yeah.
덧붙이고 싶은 거는 그렇지만 비만율은 성인 남자는 50%가 지금 넘어간 반면 여성은 20% 이하라고 알려주세요. 그래서 거의 다 건강 정책은 남성 정책이라고 보시면 된다고 했습니다.
Yes. And then another comment Jenny added was that if we look into the obesity rates in Korea, men are far more likely to be obese than women. So again, the policy is very much shaped, targeted towards men as well. Yeah.
Well, that's disappointing, but perhaps not surprising. I think going in with the evidence that promoting body confidence, body positivity, high body esteem does not cause or exacerbate the quote unquote obesity problem is the most powerful thing you can do. So making sure those that have power know that by promoting body confidence, it's not saying be unhealthy. It's if you care for if you love your body, if you appreciate your body, you are much more likely to care for it. And that might mean exercising or eating what your body needs. And as long as we've got that weight stigma in society where fat is considered bad, obesity is the new pandemic or whatever we want to call it, you're actually holding people back from living a healthy lifestyle. So it's really counterintuitive. We're on the same page. We all want the same thing. We want healthy people. And that comes with having love and care for your body. It's having body confidence achieves that. And I think it's some people get a bit stuck that body positivity means the promotion of fat bodies. It doesn't. It just means acceptance.
Yeah. Thank you. 네, 우선 이거에 대한 코멘트를 주신 거는 어쨌든 이 몸에 대한 이제 긍정성을 이제 갖는 거가 결코 이제 비만이 괜찮다는 거를 이제 말하는 게 아니다라는 걸 조금 강조해 주셨고요. 결국 몸의 긍정성과 몸을 사랑한다는 것은 자기 몸에 있는 그대로 받아들이고 어떻게 하면 더 건강한 삶을 살 수 있을까를 이제 고민해 보게끔 하는 마인드라고 합니다. 근데 이제 간혹 사람들이 이런 몸의 긍정성을 이야기할 때 뭐 아무거나 먹어도 되고 아무렇게나 행동도 된다는 거에 대한 잘못 인식을 갖고 있어서 그런 건 아니라는 점을 조금 강조해 주셨습니다.
And I'll add on to Kirsty's comments, which I think are great. So this calorie count issue, it strikes me as what somebody thinks will work versus evidence. Right. So what Kirsty's talking about is actual evidence. And so maybe trying to come at it from the perspective of, well, we know from research in the US where these calorie counts have been, made more readily available on menus, that it doesn't act as a deterrent. So basically you're following a practice that hasn't been shown to be effective, and that's all within their paradigm, right? So I'm definitely supportive of what Kirsty talked about in terms of body appreciation, facilitating care for the body. But practically speaking, you're dealing with a mindset that is along the lines of restricting and limiting. So you may focus on that evidence as a lever to say what you're trying here is not effective.
Yep.
And then using the evidence that we have from body appreciation and body positivity to show this could achieve the goal that you're looking for. The other thing that, again, just more of a practical strategy, if this calorie thing is just entrenched and isn't going to go away, is then maybe trying to shift the focus to whole foods rather than ultra high processed foods. That's a way in which you can try to, again, shift to a more holistic way of thinking about food that nourishes the body versus this other approach. So it's really tough because that mindset is not uncommon of calorie counting and restricting. So it might be baby steps where you're not going to get to them taking those calorie counts down until you're several years out. And so maybe the initial step is something smaller, and then you work towards it. So I think that's generally the case with policy changes, that they're incremental rather than revolutionary, which can be very frustrating because we know that damage and harm is being done in the moment and we want a big change.
Yep.
But realistically, you probably want to think about this as a long-term strategy.
Yep, that makes
수호님,
sense.
번역하시기 전에 한 가지만 더 붙일게요.
네.
이게 말씀을 들어보니까, 왜냐하면 이게 우리나라에는 그 연구 에코시스템 자체가 지금 발표하신 그 연구 내용처럼 그렇게 정직하지가 않다는 점을 말씀드리고 싶네요. 그러니까 여기서는 아까 연구 결과가 실패로 나왔다, 뭐 그 이유를 찾고 이런 식으로 진행되는데, 우리는 그렇게 투명하지 않다는 점을 말씀드리고 싶어요. 그래서
혹시
에비던스
왜
베이스가
안 투명한지 조금 추가 설명 말씀 부탁드릴까요?
그러니까 이게 실패를 가리려고 하는 게 되게 많죠. 연구에 대한 신뢰도가 떨어지고 아카데믹이 굉장히 좁아서, 그런 면도 이렇게 투명하게 그러니까 연구 기반으로, 근거 기반으로 정책이 지는 게 덜하다는 점을 좀 말씀드려요. 그래서
네.
아마.
Yeah, just another additional comment from Jeannie is that, which is also quite unfortunate in the Korean system, is that often evidence, research, big body of research evidence don't really translate into policy, and often those research themselves can be quite not so transparent and not very trustworthy. So just, she wanted to add that comment. but I think all policies should strive to be evidence-based as it should be. 네, 우선 번역해서 말씀드리겠습니다. 네, 우선 잠깐만요. 말씀을 많이 해주셔가지고 그래서 결국 베스 선생님이 또 추가로 칼로리 카운팅에 대해서 말씀 주신 코멘트는 두 가지를 좀 나눠서 생각해 보야 된다고 말씀하셨습니다. 첫 번째는 대부분 이러한 정책들을 시행한 이유는 누군가가 이게 왠지 먹힐 것 같다라고 하는 MMO에서 그런 어떤
맞습니다.
주장이 있을 거고, 하지만 그거와는 또 별개로 이게 진짜 연구를 통해서 나타낸 결론인지를 아는 게 중요할 것 같다고 말씀하셨습니다. 즉, 연구를 통해서 입증되지 않은 거를 주장을 하는 거가 가장 큰 문제라고 말씀을 해주셨고요. 그렇지만 이 정책이 바뀌는 데는 굉장히 이제 여러 가지 어려움이 있고, 한 번에 바뀔 수 없는 게 정책이다 보니까, 만약에 칼로리 카운팅을 해야만 하는 상황에 왔다라고 했을 때는 이제 좀 그 강조점이 조금 더 건강한 음식, 즉 예를 들어서 뭐라고 하죠? 프로세스 되지 않은 음식들, 뭐 과자나 이런 공장에서 음식이 아니라 좀 진짜 뭐라고 하죠? 프로세스 푸드 아니 홀푸드를 뭐라 그러죠? 지니님? 제가 생각이 안 나는데 그래서 좀 그런
그러게요.
곡물, 과일 이런
음.
이제 위주의 음식들을 조금 더 아이들에게 더 가르치는 거, 그 전반적으로 음식을 대하는 이제 태도나 이해를 좀 증진시키는 게 중요할 것 같다고 말씀하셨고 어찌되었든 이 먹는다는 거가 이제 몸에게 좋은 영양분을 주는 거가 중요한 마인드셋일 것 같다고 하셨습니다.
자, 이제 슬슬 마무리를 해야 될 것 같습니다.
네.
마지막 소감을 여쭤볼까요?
Yeah, so thank you so much for joining today, Beth and Kirsty. I know it's quite early where you are right now compared, so we just wanted to give you just a last chance to comment and how you felt about the session and joining us for our eating disorder week. Just last words, basically.
Oh, thanks very much for the invitation. It's noon here, so we're doing fine.
Right, okay. It's not like 4 a.m. or anything.
Yeah, no, yeah. No, we appreciate the invitation, and we hope that what we've been able to share is useful to you all to some degree, and we wish you well. We're happy to be a resource going forward as possible, so feel free to reach out.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Kirsty?
Yeah, just to add, I think the very fact that you're talking about these connections with government and stuff is fantastic. So I guess a well done from me in that can sometimes be half the battle is getting those connections to even open up that dialogue. So yeah, a big well done to Jeannie and the team for fighting this fight, I guess. And yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. 네, 굉장히 감사하다고 말씀을 주셨고 저희가 이렇게 정부와 대화를 하고 있다는 것도 굉장히 긍정적으로 본다. 그리고 언제든지 연락하라고 말씀 주셨습니다. Thank you so much for joining. We'll be in touch. Thank you.
네, 모두
Thanks, everyone.
감사합니다.
Bye.
내일은 쉬입니다. 내일은 쉬고요. 금요일에 뵙겠습니다.